Maren Ruiz was the lowest paid person in the room. A temp. 8 weeks into a 6-month contract. Her badge was printed on paper, not plastic. Her name wasn't on the invite list. She was there to take notes. And she did not fidget. Slide 14 went up on the screen. Grant Vail, Director of Demand Planning, 2 weeks from his promotion announcement, said it flat, like a door closing. Numbers are locked, people. Anholt's already seen this. 22 people sat in that room. 7 of them had doubts. 0 of them opened their mouths. Then Maren noticed something. 2 of the regional columns on that slide didn't add up to the total above them. She raised one finger. She asked a single, quiet question. And then came 11 seconds of silence nobody in that building would ever forget. If you've ever watched a whole room agree with something you knew was wrong and felt like the least important person there, this story is for you. Before we go any further, do me a favor, subscribe, and comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. Now let me take you back to the beginning, because the room came later. First, there was just a woman and a spreadsheet. Her desk was on the 3rd floor of Corley Vance Household Brands in Cincinnati. Everyone called it CVH. They made the boring things. Dish soap, fabric softener, the bleach wipes under your kitchen sink. Nothing glamorous. Just the stuff that moves off a shelf 100,000 times a day and never gets a thought. Maren's job was to key in the numbers behind that movement. Shipment actuals. How many cases of home care product actually left the warehouse last week, and where they went? She took the raw reports and typed them, line by line, into a demand planning workbook. Then the planners built forecasts on top of her work. Then the directors built decks on top of the planners. And somewhere far above all of it, a parent company in another state looked at the top line and decided how much money to spend. Nobody thanked her for the typing. That was fine. She hadn't expected them to. Here is the thing about Maren, though. She didn't just type. She checked. It was a habit from her last life, and it had grown into her hands like a callus. Before CVH, she'd spent 4 years reconciling shipping manifests for a freight broker. 4 years of matching what a truck was supposed to carry against what it actually carried. In that world, a number that didn't tie out wasn't a rounding error. It was a lost pallet. A wrong bill. A customer on the phone at 7 in the morning. So she'd learned one rule and never let go of it. Tie every total back to its source. Every total. Every time. If the column said one thing and the sum said another, one of them was lying. And it was her job to find out which. She did it without thinking now. She did it the way you check a stove before you leave the house. The freight broker had cut her division 2 years back. Just like that. She'd been good at the work, and it hadn't mattered. They folded the desk and sent everyone home with a box. She'd learned something from that too, though it took her a while to name it. She'd learned she was disposable. Not because she was bad, because she was cheap and she was outside. The 2 things that make a person easy to erase. So now she was a temp. Red Point Staffing had placed her here. Every couple of weeks, her agency rep would call to check in, friendly enough, and every couple of weeks he'd remind her of the same small print. The assignment could end with 2 days' notice. No reason required. That was the deal. She kept a paper badge in a plastic sleeve, clipped to her collar. The salaried people had hard plastic ones, with a chip inside that opened doors. Hers opened nothing. She had to wait by the glass for someone to let her through in the mornings. Most days someone did. Some days she waited a while. She didn't mind, most of the time. There was a strange freedom in weighing nothing. No politics. No meetings that ate your afternoon. No one expected her at the after-work things. She came in, she did honest work, she left. She thought that lightness was a gift. She didn't yet understand the other half of it. That the same lightness that let her float above the politics was also the reason no one would ever stand in front of her when the wind came. You don't shield a person who was never really there. The QBR was coming. That was the word in the air that week. The quarterly business review. The big meeting where demand planning showed its forecast for the coming quarter, and the leaders nodded, and the whole company aimed itself at those numbers for the next 3 months. Maren picked things up in fragments. A temp hears more than people think, because people forget she's listening. And what she heard, that week, made her ears warm. The forecast for Grant's meeting had already been sent up. Not just internally, it had gone all the way to Anhalt Group, the parent company, ahead of a capital review. 41 days out, Anhalt was going to look at CVH's numbers and decide how much money to put behind the home care line for the year. And Grant's forecast, his big Q3 home care number, was already sitting in front of them. That was the part that made Maren pause over her coffee. The number was out. It had left the building. Somebody upstairs, somewhere she'd never see, had already written it down as real. Devin Ellery told her the rest, without meaning to. Devin was a junior analyst, maybe 24, always slightly behind, and always honest about it. He liked talking to Maren because she never made him feel dumb. One afternoon, he leaned on the edge of her desk, waiting for a report to run, and said the thing that would matter more than he knew. You know the crazy part? The raw extract just sits in the shared drive. The whole deck's built off a pivot table nobody ever reties. Somebody built it like 2 quarters ago. We just refresh it and trust it. Maren looked up. Nobody reties the pivot to the extract? Why would we? Devin shrugged. It's always been fine. She filed that away. She didn't say anything. But something in her went quiet and alert, the way it used to when a manifest total looked a hair too round. There was one more thing that week. Small, almost nothing. A man passed through their aisle late one afternoon, on his way to somewhere else. Tall, 40s, a little rumpled, carrying a coffee that had clearly gone cold. Elias Wren. He ran finance analytics, a different function entirely, a floor away, a world away from a data entry temp. She'd seen him maybe twice. He stopped for a second when he saw the workbook open on her screen, and he said something that didn't land on anyone at the time. You building off the demand pivot? He nodded at it, half to himself. I used to sit on that side of the house, learn the hard way what a locked number costs. Then he was gone, off toward the stairwell, before she could ask what he meant. Learn the hard way. She turned the phrase over once and set it down. It didn't seem important yet. Almost nothing that matters ever does, the first time you hear it. The night before the QBR, Maren did something she didn't have to do. She printed the deck. All of it. She wasn't presenting. She wasn't even sure she was going. But she liked to see numbers on paper, where her eye could walk across a row the way her hand used to walk across a manifest. She spread the printed slides on her kitchen table at home, under a lamp, and she uncapped a red felt tip pen. Old habit. In the freight days, red meant check this. Her hand still reached for it. Slide 14 was the money slide. The Q3 home care forecast, broken out by region. She ran the red tip down the columns, the way she always did, tying each number back toward where it should have come from. And her pen stopped. 2 of the regional lines, Ohio Valley and Mid-South, sat right above a total labeled Central. But Ohio Valley plus Mid-South didn't make Central. The total was too big, not by a rounding error, by a wide, ugly margin. She added it again in the margin, small numbers in red, then a third time. The columns did not add to the total. The total was inflated. She sat very still in her kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car went past and lit the wall, and went dark. She told herself the boring answer. Someone had checked this. 22 people were going to look at it tomorrow. Directors, AVP. It had gone to Anhalt already. Surely, if the slide were wrong, one of all those important people would have caught it before now. But her freight instinct wouldn't let it go. Tie every total back to its source. She hadn't seen the source. She'd only seen the slide. And the slide didn't tie. She capped the pen. She put slide 14 on top of the stack. She went to bed and did not sleep well. The conference room the next morning was the big one, on the 4th floor, with the long table and the extra chairs pushed against the walls for the overflow. Maren took a wall chair, near the door, laptop open, ready to take notes. That was the job. Capture the action items. Send them around after. Be useful and be invisible. She counted the room without meaning to, the way you count anything you've been told to record. 22 people, directors and planners and 2 finance faces, and Diane Okafor, the VP of S&OP, at the head of the table, calm and unreadable. Elias Wren was there too, along the far wall, a little apart, watching more than talking. Grant Vail ran the deck. He was good at it, in the way that has nothing to do with being right. Confident voice, clean pace. He owned the process, and you could tell he thought owning the process was the same thing as owning the truth. 2 weeks from his promotion, he moved through those slides like a man walking to collect an award. Slide 14 came up. Maren's stomach dropped, quietly, the way it does when a thing you hoped you'd imagined turns out to be sitting right there on the wall, 10 feet tall. There it was, Ohio Valley. Mid-South. The central total above them, too large. On the big screen, in front of everyone, the same numbers that hadn't tied in her kitchen still didn't tie. Nobody said a word. Grant talked over it, smooth, pointing at the growth, at the strong Q3 story, at the momentum in home care. Maren looked around the table. She watched faces. She was good at faces from 4 years of phone calls. And she saw it. A flicker, here and there. A planner who glanced at the screen and then at his own notes and frowned, just slightly, then smoothed it away. A senior woman who pressed her lips together and said nothing. Little tells. Little hesitations. People who saw something and decided, in half a second, that it wasn't their something to say. 7 of them, if she'd had to guess. 7 people in that room felt a snag and swallowed it. She was the 8th. And she was the only one who didn't have a career in that building to protect. That, more than courage, is what raised her hand. She didn't raise her whole hand, just one finger, the way you do when you're not sure you're allowed. Grant paused. Every head turned toward the wall, toward the paper badge and the note-taker, with a kind of mild surprise, like a chair had spoken. "Sorry," Maren said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Could someone send me the raw extract? 2 of the regional columns don't add to the total on this slide. Ohio Valley and Mid-South. They don't sum to the central figure." Grant looked at slide 14. Then he looked at her. And then he did the thing that would follow him for the rest of this story. He didn't check. "Numbers are locked," he said. "Anhalt's already seen this." And then it happened. The 11 seconds. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved to a laptop to add 2 columns. Nobody said, "Hold on, let's just look." The room simply sat inside the silence and waited for it to pass, the way you wait for a bad smell to fade if you don't acknowledge it. Maren counted it later in her memory and always came out around 11. 11 seconds is a very long time when a room is deciding not to look at you. 7 people looked at their laptops. Not to check the number, to have somewhere to put their eyes. Not one of them looked at her. Then Grant clicked to slide 15, and the meeting rolled on like water, closing over a stone, and Maren wrote the action items and sent them around after. And it was as if she'd said nothing at all. Except she had. And 4 people had heard it. They came to find her, one at a time over the next hour, and each one told her something true about the place she worked. Tom Beckley found her first, at the coffee station. He was a planner, mid-40s, the kind of man who survives 20 years somewhere by knowing exactly which fights to lose. He kept his voice low. "That took guts," he said. "I'll give you that." Then he set down his cup and looked at her plainly. "But I'm going to be straight with you, because nobody else will. You just made an enemy, and you don't have the tenure to be right. In here, being right isn't the thing. Being safe is the thing. Remember that." He walked off before she could answer. Cheryl Voss came next, senior planner. She was one of the pressed lip faces from the table, Maren was almost sure. Cheryl waited until the hallway was empty, then touched Maren's arm, quick and light, like she was passing her something she didn't want to be seen holding. "Thank you," Cheryl said, "for asking. You were right to." A pause. "I've had a bad feeling about that regional split for 2 quarters." And Maren waited for the next part. The part where a senior person with a plastic badge says, "And so I'm going to do something about it." It didn't come. Cheryl just squeezed her arm once more, said be careful, and went back to her desk. She would say nothing in public. Not then. Not for weeks. Her private thanks and her public silence were the same coin, and Maren was learning to read both sides. Devin Ellery found her third, and Devin was different. Devin was scared, and he didn't hide it. "Can you show me again?" he asked. "The columns, I want to understand what you saw." So she took him to a whiteboard in an empty room. She wrote Ohio Valley. She wrote Mid-South. She added them. She wrote Central above, the number from the slide. She drew a line between the sum and the total and tapped it with the marker. "That gap," she said. "Two of them don't make the third. Somewhere upstream, something got counted twice, or a number got carried that shouldn't have. I can't tell you what from here. I'd have to see the raw extract. But the slide can't be right. It just can't." Devin looked at the two numbers for a long moment, and then he went pale, really pale, the color leaving his face from the top down. Because Devin was the one who refreshed the pivot. Devin was the one who told her, days before, that nobody ever retied it. "Oh no," he said quietly. "Oh no, don't panic," Maren said. "It might be nothing. Let's not decide it's something until we've seen the file." But they both knew. You can feel the difference between a thing that might be wrong and a thing that is wrong. This one had weight. Elias Wren found her last. He came looking, which she noticed. The other three had run into her. He'd searched. He didn't lead with drama. He just leaned in the doorway of the little room where she was erasing the whiteboard and said, "That was a good catch in there. It might be nothing," she said for the third time that day, believing it less each time. "It's not nothing." He said it gently. "How'd you see it?" Everyone in that room has looked at that slide 100 times. She told him about the freight broker, about tying every total back to its source, about the red pen in the kitchen table. He listened the whole way through without interrupting, which almost no one did. Then he said, "You're wasted on data entry. I run finance analytics. I've been trying to build a team that can actually say the true number out loud, and I keep hiring people who look at the slide instead of the source. I'd like you on it. Full time. Analyst role." Maren. He said her name. Correctly, Maren. With the flat first vowel. Not Maren or Maren. The way everyone here got it wrong. And a moment later, he said it again, laying out what the role would be, and it was right both times. 8 weeks in that building, and he was the first person to say her name the way her mother said it. Something in her chest moved. She noticed that too, and set it aside, because she also saw the shape of what he was offering, and she saw the trap folded inside the kindness. "That's thank you," she said. "Really, but no. Not now." His eyebrows went up. "If I take a job today," she said slowly, working it out as she spoke, "off the back of that meeting, then this becomes about me. The temp who complained and got rescued. The temp who wanted a promotion. And it isn't about me. It's about the number. The number's either right or it's wrong, and that's true whether I have a job or not. Let me be nobody a little longer. Nobody's easier to believe." He looked at her for a second like she'd surprised him. Then he nodded. Slow. "Okay," he said. "The offer stands. It'll keep." And he left it there, which was the right thing to do, and rare. She should have felt good. 4 people had come to her. One of them had offered her a real job. Salaried, plastic badge, the thing she was supposed to want. Instead, she felt the floor tilting under the whole building, and she was the only one standing where she could see the slope. That night she stayed. She waited until the floor emptied out. Then she opened the shared drive and found the raw extract, the actual pull, the source data. The thing Devon said nobody ever retied. She opened the pivot the deck was built on. And she started doing what she'd done for 4 years to freight manifests. She tied the total back to its source. It took her most of 2 hours. She was careful. She wanted to be wrong. She kept looking for the honest explanation, the one where she was the fool who'd embarrassed herself in front of 22 people. She did not find it. What she found was this. The pivot was stale. Someone had built it 2 quarters back, and it carried a promotional lift, a bump in shipments from a big in-store promotion, inside one of the regional feeds. When the promotion data got refreshed into a second feed later, nobody removed it from the first. So the lift was in there twice. Counted once in Ohio Valley's source, counted again in the central roll-up. Double, the forecast wasn't a little high. It was inflated by a whole phantom promotion. When she netted it out, the overstatement came to 214,000 cases of home care product. Cases that were never going to ship, sitting inside a number the parent company had already written down as real. She sat back. 214,000 cases. She didn't know yet what that was in dollars. She'd learn soon enough, and the figure would take the air out of her. But even without the dollar sign, she knew what she was looking at. A big, confident, socialized number, wrong by a mile, headed for a room full of people who spent money based on it. She printed her reconciliation, her own hand-tied version. The columns walked back to the source, the double count circled and labeled. Then she took her printed slide 14 from the night before, the one with the red pen math in the margin, and she pinned the two together. She circled the 2 guilty columns again, harder this time. Red felt tip-biting into the paper. Ohio Valley. Mid-South. And the total that lied above them. Long night. She turned. Elias was standing at the end of the row, jacket over his arm, the only other person left in the building. He'd seen the lie. "I found it," she said. She held up the pages. "It's real. It's a double-counted promo lift. The forecast's over by 214,000 cases." He set his jacket down and pulled a chair to her desk without asking. And for the next hour, they sat at one screen and retied it together, line by line. Him asking the sharp questions, and her answering them, until there was nothing left to doubt. At some point, the Mr. Wren and the Miss Ruiz fell away, and neither of them noticed until it had already happened. "There," he said finally, tapping the last cell. "That's the miss. Clean. God. Maren. Elias," she said, and it was just his name. But it was the first time she'd used it, and it sat in the quiet between them for a beat longer than a name usually does. He straightened. "Let me carry this up," he said. "I've got the standing to walk it into a room. You give it to me, I take it to Diane in the morning, it lands with weight. Nobody can wave off a finance director. They can wave off a..." He stopped. "A temp," she finished for him. Not angry. Just naming it. "That's not what I meant. It's what's true, though." She gathered the pages, squared them. "And that's exactly why it can't be you who carries it." He waited. "If a finance director walks this in," she said, "it's just another senior man's number against Grant's senior number. 2 important men, and the room picks a side by rank. But if it comes from me, from the person with the paper badge, the one with nothing to gain, then it's not a power fight. It's just the truth. Standing there with no title on. Let it be that. Please." He looked at her for a long moment. She could see him wanting to argue. She could see something older behind his eyes, some private thing pulling him toward "let me protect you," and she could see him make himself set it down. "Okay," he said again. "But I'm right behind you." Over the next 2 days, she learned what she'd found in dollars, and what already socialized to Anholt actually meant. 214,000 cases came to a $3.8 million overstatement. $3.8 million of demand that did not exist. And that number wasn't sitting quietly in a draft. It had gone up to Anholt Group. The parent company had it in front of them for a capital review, the meeting where they decide how much money to pour into a whole product line. Now 39 days out. They had booked the Phantom. They were about to spend real money against it. And Grant's promotion was going to be announced before any of that came home. That was the piece that made the whole thing snap into focus for her. Everyone with tenure in this building had a reason to keep the number buried until after Grant's name went on the door. Grant, obviously, but also the planners who'd built on it. The VP who'd sent it up and would have to explain why it went up wrong. Every single person with a plastic badge had something to lose by pulling the thread now, and something to gain by waiting. Everyone except her. She had no promotion pending, no relationship with Anholt, no career in that building to shield. She was the one person the math couldn't cost anything, because she was already free the way a leaf is free, blowing across a parking lot. And she was beginning to understand that this was not only her freedom, it was the reason it had to be her, and the reason no one would catch her when she fell. She decided on a Thursday. She didn't tell Elias she'd decided, though he offered again, one more time, quietly, in the elevator, the job, the cover, the standing behind her. No, she said, not to be protected into silence. I've watched a whole room stay quiet. I'm not going to do a quiet version of the same thing. He didn't push. He just looked at her the way you look at someone you've decided to respect all the way through. And he let the doors open. And he let her go alone. She walked down the fourth-floor hall to Diane Okafor's office with the pinned pages in her hand. No sponsor. No title. No plastic badge to open the last door. She had to knock on the frame and wait to be waved in. Diane looked up from her monitor, mild, unreadable. A VP with 100 fires and no idea which one this was. You're the note-taker, Diane said. Not unkindly, just placing her. Maren Ruiz. I'm on contract, in demand planning. Her heart was going hard now, but her hands were steady, the way they always were when the numbers were on her side. She stepped to the desk, and she slid the top page across it, the printed slide 14, the two regional columns circled in red, the total that didn't tie, and clipped behind it her own reconciliation, the double count laid bare. Before your capital review goes to Anholt, Maren said, you need to see this. The Q3 home care forecast is overstated by $3.8 million. And I can show you exactly where. Diane Okafor looked down at the red circles on the page. For a long moment, she didn't say anything at all. And in that silence, a different silence than the one in the conference room, a silence that might go any direction, Maren realized she had just done the one thing she could never take back. The door was closed behind her. The pages were on the desk. There was no version of the next 10 minutes where she was still invisible. Diane picked up the page. She held it to the light. And then, slowly, she reached for her phone. Diane didn't dial a number. She set the phone back down. She read the reconciliation instead, top to bottom, the way you read something you're hoping to find a hole in. There was no hole. Ohio Valley and Mid-South, she said. Both carrying the promo lift. Both, Maren said. It's counted once in the regional feed, and again when the pivot rolls up to Central. The pivot's 2 quarters old. Nobody retied it. Diane sat back. She looked at Maren for a long moment, and something behind her eyes did math that wasn't on the page. 41 days. A capital review. A number already inside Anholt's building. Leave this with me, Diane said. It's a copy, Maren said. I have the source. That was the last easy conversation Maren had for 6 weeks. She thought the fix would be fast. The number was wrong. She had proven it was wrong. In her old world, at the freight broker, a wrong number got corrected before lunch, because a wrong number cost somebody money that afternoon. She kept waiting for that speed here. It never came. What came instead was quiet. Diane verified it. Maren knew, because Devin told her. Devin Ellery, the junior analyst, who had gone pale at the whiteboard, and then, unlike everyone else, had come back for more. He pulled the extract himself. He rebuilt the pivot from scratch. And he sat down next to Maren at her temp desk with his hands flat on the surface and said, "You're right. I refreshed a stale table. I've been refreshing it for 2 quarters. You didn't build it," she said. "I trusted it." He looked sick. "Nobody told me to check. Nobody tells anybody to check," she said. "That's the whole problem." So the number was real. Diane knew it was real. And still, nothing moved. Because the number wasn't just a number. It was $3.8 million. It was 214,000 cases of home care product that didn't exist as demand. And it was already gone. Socialized, they called it. Sent up to Anhole Group 40 1 days before the people who decide where money goes would sit down and decide. To correct it now meant walking into that room and saying, "We told you a bigger number than the truth." It meant somebody's name on the walk back. And the name that should have been on it was 2 weeks from a promotion. Grant Vail did not panic. Maren had to give him that. She watched him from the outside, the way a temp watches everything, and she saw a man who understood the machinery he was standing in. He didn't deny the discrepancy. Denying it would have made him wrong. Instead, he made it small. He called it a process gap. He called it a refresh cadence issue. He put it in a category of things that happen, that anyone would understand, that no single person owns. And then, gently, without ever saying it out loud, he let the story find a shape. The shape was this: an agency temp. Data entry. No context on the promotional calendar, no line of sight into the regional feeds, went around her chain, pulled files she wasn't cleared to pull, and raised an alarm in a room full of directors. Was she right about the arithmetic? Sure, but look at how it happened. Look at who. That's the real gap. Not the number. The controls. Maren heard it come back to her secondhand. Tom Beckley told her. Tom, mid-40s, a planner who'd been at CVH long enough to read weather. "You made an enemy," Tom said. He'd said it the first week, too. He said it again now, like a man confirming a forecast of his own. "I told you. You don't have the tenure to be right about this. Being right isn't the thing. Being right and disposable, that's the thing. You're the second one. The number's still wrong," Maren said. "The number's getting fixed," Tom said. "That's not the same as you getting thanked." He wasn't cruel about it. He looked almost sorry. They'll fix it quiet, and they'll need it to have come from a process. Not a person. Especially not a person they can let go with 2 days' notice. Cheryl Voss said nothing at all. Cheryl, senior planner, who 6 weeks earlier had stopped by Maren's desk and said, softly, so no one could hear, "Thank you. I felt something was off in that regional split for 2 quarters, and I never chased it." Cheryl who meant it. Cheryl who, in every meeting after, looked at the table. Elias Wren did not stay quiet. That was the difference in him, and Maren felt it before she understood it. He didn't tell her what he was doing. That was the part she'd learn later. He went to Diane. He went to his own VP. He argued that the correction had to be made cleanly and fast, and that the source of the catch mattered, that you don't get to keep the save and disown the person who made it. He spent capital. Real capital. He crossed Grant's faction on purpose, in rooms Maren wasn't in, over a temp on another team who kept refusing his job offer. He did it for her, not to win her. There's a difference, and he knew the difference, because he'd spent years on the wrong side of it. She found that out on a Tuesday, in the aisle by her desk, with his cold coffee going colder in his hand. "Can I tell you something?" he said. It wasn't a question. 4 years ago, I sat in a room like that one. Different company. Different number. Somebody put up a figure I knew was soft. I could feel it was soft. And I had the seniority to say so. He turned the cup a quarter turn. I didn't. I told myself it wasn't my function. It wasn't my deck. Somebody more senior than me would catch it. The number shipped. It cost people I never met their year. He finally looked at her. So when I say I want you on my team, understand, I've been trying to buy back a room I sat quiet in. And you did in 11 seconds what I couldn't do with a title. Maren was quiet for a moment. She'd wondered, that first night, why a director of finance analytics would retie a reconciliation line by line with a temp at 9 at night. That's why you keep offering, she said. That's why. You're trying to rescue me, she said, gently, because nobody rescued the room you were in. He didn't argue. That was the thing about Elias. He didn't argue when you were right. I don't need rescuing, she said. I need the number fixed, and I need it to have my name on the catch, not because I want credit. Because if it doesn't, then the lesson this building learns is that the temp should have kept quiet, and the next temp will. He heard that. She watched him hear it, and something in how he was standing changed. The difference between a man holding an umbrella over you and a man deciding to walk out into the rain beside you. The call from Red Point Staffing came on a Thursday. Her agency rep was kind about it, in the way people are kind when they're reading from a script. CVH had concluded the assignment early. Effective in 2 days. No cause cited, none was needed. That was the whole point of a contract that could end with 2 days' notice. There'd be other placements. They'd keep her file active. They valued her. 2 days. Maren sat with the phone against her ear and looked at her paper badge in its plastic sleeve, clipped to her collar, and she understood the shape of it completely. She had been able to ask the question in that room precisely because she was disposable. She had no promotion to protect, no faction, no 4 years of favors to call in, and none owed to her. Weightlessness had let her raise one finger when 22 heavier people kept their hands flat on the table. And weightlessness was why no one would catch her now. She didn't cry. She didn't make a scene. She'd already made the only scene that mattered. She keyed her last shipment actuals into the workbook, tied every total back to its source out of habit, one final time. She unclipped the paper badge and set it on the desk. And she took the printed slide 14, the 2 regional columns circled in red felt tip, her reconciliation still clipped behind it. And she carried it down the hall and left it on Elias Wren's desk. He wasn't there. She didn't leave a note. The pages were the note. Then she went home. She thought that was the end of her part in it. She'd been the second disposable thing in 4 years. The freight broker cut her division. CVH concluded her assignment. She was getting good at being concluded. She was wrong about it being the end. But she didn't know that yet, and neither did the room. The correction meeting was called on short notice, 39 days out from Anholt's review. Same conference room, same long table, many of the same 22, Grant, Cheryl, Tom, Devin, the directors, the planners. Diane Okafor at the head, and Elias Wren, from another function entirely, in a seat he'd asked for. Diane presented the revised number herself. She didn't soften it. $3.8 million, 214,000 cases, a double-counted promotional lift in the Ohio Valley and Mid-South feeds, rolled up twice through a pivot that hadn't been retied in 2 quarters. She put the corrected slide on the projector. The columns tied now. Central was smaller. The truth was smaller. It usually is. This is the number that goes to Anholt, Diane said. Corrected, with a note on how it was caught, and how we're closing the gap so it doesn't recur. Grant leaned forward. Smooth, reasonable, 2 weeks from a title. I think that's exactly right, he said, and I'd frame the note around the control itself. The refresh cadence on the regional pivot. That's the real learning here. A process gap, not a. Say the rest of it, Grant. Elias didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The room went still the way rooms do when someone spends money in public. You were going to say, not a person. The correction has a name. And she isn't in this room because we let her contract lapse 2 days after she handed us $3.8 million. Nobody moved. Maren Ruiz, Elias said. Temp, data entry. She caught it in 11 seconds off the raw extract. The file none of us pulled. Not me. Not you. Not the 22 people who nodded at slide 14 the first time it went up. He let that sit. We can send Anholt a clean number and a story about a process gap. Or we can be a building that knows where its true numbers come from. We don't get both. Grant's jaw worked. He looked to the faces that usually agreed with him and found them looking at the table, which is a different thing than agreeing. With respect, Grant said, the arithmetic was straightforward. Anyone tracing the columns would have, then trace them, Diane said. She said it mildly. She had the red circled printout in her hand, the one Maren had left on Elias's desk. The one Elias had walked back into the building. She slid it down the table. Live, Diane said, on the projector. Ohio Valley plus Mid-South. Reconcile it to Central for us, Grant. Show the room where the promo lift belongs and where it got counted twice. You own this forecast. Walk us through it. Grant looked at the page, the red circles, the margin math in Temp's handwriting. He picked up the pen. He went to the screen. He put a cursor on Ohio Valley, and he started to talk about the calendar, the timing, the phasing of the lift, and Maren, had she been there, could have told them in the first sentence that he was describing the symptom and not the double count, that he didn't actually know where the second count entered, because he had never once tied the pivot back to its source. He talked for a while. Then he stopped talking. Because there's a point where the room can see that you're narrating around a hole instead of closing it. And Grant, whatever else he was smart enough to feel that point arrive. He set the pen down. I'll have my team document the reconciliation, he said. Quiet now. Devin already did, Diane said. Devin Ellery sat up. Nobody had cued him. He hadn't planned to speak. Maren would learn that later, too. That it just came out of him, the first time in his career anything had. I reran it with her, Devin said. Maren, at a whiteboard, the day after the QBR. Then I pulled the extract myself and rebuilt the pivot from the raw feed. She was right to the case. 214,000. He swallowed. I'm the one who refreshed the stale table every quarter. So if we're naming a control gap, name mine. But she caught it. Off the file. In 11 seconds. I couldn't have found it in a week because it never occurred to me to look. The alley the question created. The first person Maren taught to ask. He didn't know he was proving her whole point. He was just telling the truth, which turned out to be the same thing. Diane turned, unhurried, to Cheryl Voss. Cheryl, you've owned the regional split longest. Did you have concerns about the Ohio Valley and Mid-South numbers before the QBR? The room waited. Cheryl looked at the table. She had thanked Maren in a whisper. She had felt it for 2 quarters. She had chased nothing. Cheryl started. And then she stopped. And the not finishing was the whole answer, and everyone heard it, and Cheryl heard herself not finish, which was maybe the worst part for her. I should have flagged it, she said finally, to the wood grain. I felt something. I didn't chase it. Nobody piled on. They didn't need to. Her silence had already testified. Grant Vail's promotion announcement was not made 2 weeks later. There was no memo about why. There was just a different name, a quarter on, in a different role, and a dry line in a planning update that the demand planning director search was ongoing. No one gloated. In a building like that, the absence of the announcement is the announcement. The people who needed to understand it, understood it. That's how Office Capital works. It's the opposite of the raw file. You never get to see the arithmetic. You only see the total, and you learn to trace it back yourself. Diane found Maren through Redpoint, which was its own small justice, the agency that had concluded her, now relaying a message to unconclude her. But Diane didn't offer it as a rescue, and Maren wouldn't have taken it as one. The offer was a full-time analyst role. On merit, from the VP of S&OP, in writing, because the person who catches a $3.8 million error before it reaches a parent company's capital review is not a favor you do. She's a hire you'd be foolish not to make. Maren read the offer at her kitchen table, where the whole thing had started. Red felt tip still sitting where she'd left it. She said yes. On her terms. Her role. Her team. Not Elias's team, she was careful about that, and Diane understood why without being told. Not because she didn't trust Elias, because the number had never been about her, and she wasn't going to let her hiring be about a man who'd offered her a job 3 times. She'd earned a seat that didn't come with anyone's arm around it. Elias took that the way he'd taken everything true she'd ever said to him. He didn't argue. They became peers. That's the plain word for it, and it's the only word that fits the 11 months that followed. 2 refused offers behind them. A correction filed clean with Anholt, the Capital Review run on a number that was actually true. The $3.8 million never spent chasing demand that wasn't there. And 2 people who had learned, at one desk at 9 at night, that they could say the true number to each other. That turned out to be the rarest thing either of them had. For a long time, that was all it was. Colleagues who didn't flinch when the other one was right. Do you know how uncommon that is? 2 quarters went by, then 3. He never made offer number 4. She noticed that he'd stopped trying to rescue her right around the time she stopped needing it, which was around the time she started, quietly, to want him near for reasons that had nothing to do with the work. It began, over coffee. His, cold as usual, because the man could not remember to drink it warm. Hers, black. They'd retied a messy inventory reconciliation that afternoon, the old habit. Tie every total back to its source, and they were sitting with the last of it, and the pages were done, and neither of them got up. I keep thinking about the coffee that first night, she said. You had a cup going cold in the hallway then, too. I remember the hallway, he said. I remember you told me it had to come from you, or it was just another senior man's number. Was I wrong? You were right, he said. You've been right about nearly everything since I met you. It's very annoying. She laughed, and his hand was on the table near hers, and she looked at it, and she didn't take it, not yet, because she was a person who tied things back to the source before she trusted the total. And then she traced it back. 11 months, 2 refused offers, a fight he'd fought without telling her, a room years ago he was still buying back. And the total held. She took his hand. For the record, she said, you're not rescuing me. No, he said. I know that now. Took me a while. Say the rest of it, she said, because she'd heard him use the line on Grant and she wanted it back, softer. He smiled. I'd rather be right beside you than right without you, he said. One line. He'd been saving it, maybe, or maybe it just arrived. Either way, she let it be the whole speech, because the best true numbers don't need a second decimal. That's the love story. It took 11 months and it fit in a sentence, and it never once got ahead of its proof. Now here's the part I want you to sit with. 11 months after that first QBR, they held another one. Same conference room, same long table. Slide 14, whatever the 14th slide happened to be that quarter. And Maren Ruiz was in the room, salaried, her name on a plastic badge now, a real one, the kind that opens doors. Down at the far end sat a temp, data entry, paper badge in a plastic sleeve, there to take notes, name not on the invite, sitting exactly where Maren had sat. The slide went up. The numbers rolled. The presenter moved fast, the way presenters do when they assume the totals are gospel. And Maren, without a word, slid a red felt tip pen down the length of that table. It skated past the directors and the planners and stopped in front of the temp. The temp looked at the pen, looked at Maren. Didn't understand. Why would she? Maren just waited. And the temp, because something on that slide didn't sit right, because the columns near the bottom didn't feel like they summed, because the instinct to tie a total back to its source, lives in people who've had to earn their keep by never being wrong about a manifest. The temp raised one finger. Sorry, the temp said. Could someone send me the raw file? I don't think two of these add up to the total. And this time, the room didn't spend 11 seconds pretending it hadn't heard. This time, 3 people reached for their laptops to pull the extract. Because Maren hadn't just caught one number 11 months back. She'd built the room where the question survives, where the next waitlist person could ask it and not get concluded in 2 days for the trouble. That's who asked the second question. The next person nobody thinks matters, but only if someone made a place for the asking. I want to leave you with 2 versions of Maren, and then I'll let you go. There's the one that almost happened. The Maren who noticed the columns didn't add and did the sensible thing, who didn't raise a finger in a room of 22, who went back to her desk and typed a careful email to one person. Hey, I think slide 14 might have an issue, no rush, and let it sit in an inbox. In that version, the forecast ships. 3.8 million follows it up to Anholt. The room stays comfortable. Grant gets his title. And nobody, not one person in that building ever learns her name. She finishes her 6 months. She gets concluded anyway. The number was wrong the whole time, and the only thing that changed is that she was polite about it. And then there's the one that did happen. The Maren who asked out loud. Once, in public, in front of everyone who could hurt her for it. Same woman, same arithmetic, same disposable badge. The only variable was the finger she raised and the room she raised it in. Here's the hard thing, and I'm not going to dress it up. She wasn't braver than the 22. 7 of them saw what she saw. They had mortgages and titles and 4 years of relationships to protect. And she had a paper badge and 2 days' notice. She could afford to be right in a way they couldn't. She was cheaper to be, and that cut both ways. It's why she could ask. And it's why no one caught her when she fell. So the next time you're the least important person in the room, and the number on the screen is wrong, and everyone with a heavier badge is looking at their laptop, remember that the weight they carry is also what keeps their hands flat on the table. Sometimes the only person free enough to raise a finger is the one with nothing to protect. Raise it anyway. And if you ever get heavy, if your badge ever turns to plastic, slide the pen down the table. Comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. The correction meeting lasted 41 minutes. Diane sent a revised number to Anholt's CFO the following Tuesday. Not revised. She called it reconciled, which is a different kind of honesty. The Capital Review adjusted accordingly. Nobody used the word wrong. But everyone in that building knew, by Wednesday morning, exactly which 2 columns hadn't added, and exactly who had noticed first. Grant Vail's promotion announcement never came. There was no public statement. He was simply there one quarter, and then the next, heading a smaller unit in a different city, which is the corporate version of a sentence without a verdict. Cheryl Voss remained a senior planner. She started pulling the raw extract on Kubar morning, every quarter after that. Quietly, before anyone else arrived. She never said Maren's name out loud in a meeting. She didn't need to. Devin Ellery became a passable analyst. He still asks to see the raw file before signing off on any deck. He says he learned it from a temp who used a red felt tip. He almost always remembers her name. He will get there. Elias Wren kept his seat. The capital it cost him to say her name in that room, and it cost real capital, Grant's faction spent the better part of 3 months making sure of it, was the most expensive thing he'd done in 11 years at CVH. He doesn't regret it. He has said so, once, and then not again. Because people who do the right thing and then describe it at length want credit more than they wanted justice. He did want credit. He's working on it. That's the honest version. Maren and Elias became colleagues first, the way you have to. 6 months of adjacent desks and shared QBR prep, and a running disagreement about whether the fiscal calendar should anchor on the 28th or the 1st. They had coffee twice before either admitted it was intentional. The third time, she slid the old red felt tip across the table. She'd found it in her coat pocket again, she said. He laughed. It was the first time she'd seen him laugh without the careful, measured, professional layer around it. She kept the pen. Both of them knew what it was.